The betrayal of Nazi Germany's intelligence chief Wilhelm Franz Canaris. Wilhelm Canaris joined the German Navy in April 1905 as an 18-year-old cadet at the Kiel Naval Academy. By the time World War I broke out in 1914, Canaris was serving as an officer on the cruiser Dresden, under Admiral Graf von Spee, who sank 2 British cruisers, Good Hope and Monmouth, off the coast of Chile in November 1914, an opponent of the Nazi regime. A few weeks later, von Spee's fleet was cornered by the British near the Falkland Islands. Canaris's ship attempted to escape but was trapped in Cumberland Bay, Chile, and scuttled to avoid capture. Canaris narrowly escaped with a forged passport provided by the German consulate in Santiago. He crossed the Andes into Argentina. From Buenos Aires, Canaris boarded a ship to Rotterdam and traveled by train to Berlin. He was then assigned as an intelligence officer in Spain, a role that would change his life. Canaris provided valuable intelligence on Allied navies to German naval headquarters. After the war, he returned to active duty as the captain of a U-boat submarine, credited with sinking 18 Allied ships. Following the 1918 armistice, Canaris remained in the Navy, serving on the cruiser Berlin and the battleship Schlesien, spending much of the 1920s at sea. In September 1934, a year and a half after Adolf Hitler rose to power, Canaris was appointed commander of the naval base at Swan. In 1935, Canaris was appointed head of the Abwehr, Nazi Germany's military intelligence agency, and was soon promoted to admiral. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Canaris initially believed they were what Germany needed. Hitler promised to rearm Germany and rebuild its navy, goal strongly supported by veteran sailors like Canaris. However, when Hitler began eliminating his political rivals, Canaris became a staunch opponent of the Nazi regime. During the infamous Night of the Long Knives on June 30, 1934, Hitler ordered the execution of his political adversaries, including a close friend of Canaris, Hitler's chief of staff. From that moment, Canaris became an enemy of Hitler. When World War II began, Canaris predicted that a Hitler victory would spell disaster for the world. After France surrendered in June 1940, he told his associates, if Hitler wins, it will surely be the end of Germany. And if Hitler loses, it will also be the end of Germany and ourselves for failing to stop him. Canaris began using his position as head of the Abwehr to undermine Hitler. On August 22, 1939, at Berchtesgaden, when Hitler announced his plans to invade Poland, Canaris, despite a ban on note, secretly recorded Hitler's words from the back of the room. Immediately after the meeting, Canaris drove to the Four Seasons Hotel in Munich, where he wrote down everything he could recall about Hitler's invasion plans, using his notes to refresh his memory. He then passed a summary to Colonel Hans Oster, a conspirator plotting to assassinate Hitler. Oster made a copy of the remarks and delivered it to the Dutch military attaché in Berlin, Major G.J.S. Thanks to Canaris's warning, Britain and France put their forces on full alert and pledged support for Poland in the event of a German attack. On September 1, 1939, the German Luftwaffe began bombing targets in Poland, followed hours later by a ground assault. World War II had begun. Britain and France declared war on Germany 2 days later. On September 3, 1939, Canaris made a personal vow. Nothing must be spared to shorten this war. Canaris decided the best way to shorten the war was to mislead Hitler at every opportunity. Weeks after the invasion of Poland, Canaris informed Hitler that France was planning a major attack on the Saarbrücken region. Hitler dismissed the report, correctly believing Saarbrücken was a German stronghold. No French attack occurred. Hitler's suspicions about Canaris's loyalty grew stronger. 6 months later, just before the invasion of Norway in April 1940, Canaris reported that the British Navy was on high alert and warned that German ships would be destroyed if they attempted a landing in Norway. Hitler read the report but proceeded with the invasion. The landing occurred on April 9, 1940, without any interference from the British fleet. Hitler and most senior Nazi officers quickly lost faith in the Abwehr due to Canaris's mistakes, unaware that these were calculated moves. Hitler's distrust in the Abwehr inadvertently benefited the Allies, as he often dismissed even reliable intelligence. Canaris initiated a conspiracy known as the Schwarzkapelle Black Orchestra, which included General Ludwig Beck, Army Chief of Staff, Colonel Hans Oster, Canaris's aide, General Erwin von Witzleben, and other senior officers. Beyond misleading Hitler, they aimed to supply the Allies with German military, technical, and scientific intelligence. One successful effort to provide technical intelligence to the Allies occurred in 1939. A package containing numerous technical drawings and documents was left at the doorstep of the British Embassy in Oslo, Norway, and sent to London via diplomatic pouch. In London, the documents were analyzed by Dr. R.V. Jones, a British intelligence scientist. He meticulously reviewed Nazi Germany's most secret weapons plans, including radar devices, X-ray navigation systems for guiding bombers to targets at night, guided torpedoes, and V-2 rockets. Canarus's next move against Hitler came in October 1940, when Hitler devised a plan to invade British-controlled Gibraltar. Capturing Gibraltar would cut off Britain's forces in North Africa. The plan seemed more feasible than an invasion of Britain, which had been postponed indefinitely. The plan, codenamed Operation Felix, was entrusted to Canaris, fluent in Spanish, acquainted with Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, and with several agents in Spain. Canaris was tasked with executing Operation Felix, but not in the way Hitler expected. First, Canaris drafted a detailed report explaining why Operation Felix could not succeed. Next, he instructed one of his associates, Dr. Joseph Muller, to meet with Spanish Foreign Minister Ramon Serrano Suna. Muller delivered a secret message from Canaris stating that Hitler lacked the resources to attack Spain if Franco refused to comply. Suna relayed the message to Franco. When Hitler met with Franco to discuss Gibraltar, Franco declared his intention to remain neutral and refused to allow German forces to attack Gibraltar from Spanish soil. Hitler threatened Franco for over 9 hours, but ultimately gave up. Had Gibraltar been attacked through Spain and fallen to the Germans, supplying British forces in North Africa via the Strait of Gibraltar would have been impossible. This advantage could have enabled Nazi Field Marshal Erwin Rommel and his Afrika Korps to defeat the British Eighth Army and seize the Suez Canal. Canaris's sabotage of Operation Felix cost Hitler dearly in the North African campaign. By this time, Allied intelligence concluded that Canaris was actively working against Hitler and could be trusted. Some British agents noted that Canaris made frequent trips to the Spanish town of Algeciras, likely as a pretext to leave Berlin. British agents proposed a plan to kidnap Canaris and bring him to London. However, upon hearing of the plan, British intelligence immediately cancelled it. Canaris was shrewd enough to operate on his own terms, without interference from overzealous young spies. In the fall of 1942, Nazi High Command received intelligence about an impending Allied landing. Though the timing and location were unknown, a German agent in Britain discovered that the landing would occur in French North Africa and sent a detailed report to Hamburg, the Abwehr's main station. However, the report mysteriously disappeared. Canaris claimed he never received any such communication. When Allied forces landed in Casablanca, Algiers, and Oran in the early hours of November 8, 1942, the invasion caught Hitler and his generals completely by surprise. Canaris, however, was unspared. Hitler grew increasingly furious with Canaris and his apparent incompetence as intelligence chief. Hitler decided to strip Canaris of some of his authority, transferring it to Reinhard, head of the Nazi Party's intelligence branch, the Sicherheitsdienst. Canaris temporarily escaped danger when Heydrich, the Nazi security forces commander and a key architect of the final solution, the plan to exterminate Jews in Europe during World War II, was assassinated by Czech resistance fighters trained in Britain. Though still in charge of the Abwehr, Hitler no longer trusted Canaris or any intelligence agency. In January 1944, Canaris was summoned to the headquarters of Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commander of all German forces in the Mediterranean. Kesselring had heard rumors of an Allied landing on Italy's coast and wanted to know what Canaris knew about any imminent attacks. Canaris immediately put everyone at ease, stating there was no need to fear an Allied landing. One of Kesselring's commanders asked Canaris if he knew the location of British warships. Canaris reassured them, saying, "We're tracking them. Don't worry." At that moment, approximately 250 Allied ships were approaching the Italian coast. In the early hours of the following day, 50,000 troops from the British 1st and 3rd Divisions landed at Antwerp. For Hitler, this was Canaris's final mistake. Hitler decided to remove Admiral Canaris as head of the Abwehr and replace him with a more reliable Nazi, Walter Schell. Canaris was exiled to Lowenstein Castle, a 14th-century fortress in Franconia, Bavaria. Though forced into retirement, Canaris's covert efforts against Hitler continued. He maintained contact with the Allies and his colleagues in the Schwarzkapelle Black Orchestra, a term used by the Gestapo to describe a group of German military officers plotting to overthrow Hitler. If Canaris were a character in a spy novel, his story might have had a happy ending. But Canaris lived in Nazi Germany. On the afternoon of July 20, 1944, members of the Schwarzkapelle attempted to assassinate Hitler at the Wolf's Lair, his Eastern Front military headquarters. During World War II, a Gestapo investigation targeted several Schwarzkapelle members, including Canaris, for their involvement in the assassination plot. Canaris was brought to Berlin for interrogation. Canaris spent much of the winter of 1944-1945 in a cell at Gestapo headquarters before being transferred to the Flossenburg concentration camp. On February 7, 1945, he was interrogated daily. On April 8, 1945, Canaris was beaten and tortured by the Gestapo. The following day he was hanged, and his body was cremated behind the prison block.